Welcome to a new daily top Askreddit video. Today's topic: what stranger will you never forget? When I was a broke-as-sin 18-year-old trying to make ends meet, I had a side hustle providing IT support for households, like a geek squad sort of thing. In practice, I would mostly set up computers for elderly people and the tech illiterate, and teach them how to use them. Or get them out of technical binds, usually with printers, by Googling on their behalf. This elderly Korean gentleman hired me to set up his new computer for him. I spent an hour setting it up and teaching him how to use it, and 2 more hours eating a wonderful lunch with the man and his wife. He wouldn't accept my invoice for just the first hour. Instead, he paid me 3x my hourly rate for all 3 hours, and asked me to come back to train him the next week. Over the course of about a month I came back 4 times, worked with him, had a lovely meal, and he would tell me about his family and his kids. He was so proud of his daughter, who was about to finish her residency and become a pediatrician. By the end of the month he was pretty comfortable on the PC, and I thanked him profusely for how kind he was and how ridiculously he'd overpaid me. He told me I reminded him of his son, who was estranged for some reason I didn't press, and that he hoped somewhere out there somebody was being kind to his son, and sharing a home-cooked meal with him. I don't know why, but more than 10 years later I can't think of that guy without tearing up. I hope everything turned out well for him. Damn, this reminds me of the Japanese rent-a-family business sad all around. The rent-a-family thing is way overblown. While it exists to some degree, you can trace back a lot of the posts and articles about how it's such a big deal to one main source, the one company that gets reported on all the time, which I won't name because I don't see any reason to give them more publicity. For whatever reason, Western media really loves the Weird Japan beat. Edit, though to be fair, Japanese media isn't immune to Weird Japan either. There was a flurry of domestic content after the previously mentioned output from the international outlets made the rounds. The lady who told me I looked great in blue, and that it was clearly my color. To this day if I'm deciding between shirts to buy or wear, I'll go with blue. That compliment was about 15 years ago at least. Reminds me of how I won't cut my hair beyond a certain length because I was once told by my friend's mom that I looked really fantastic and like Iggy Pop or something. Someone told me I look like Jerry Garcia. I don't know if it's a compliment or not. But holy shit, they were right. I look like a Muslim Jerry Garcia. My lost wallet was returned in the mail. The anonymous stranger sent it back at their own expense, $9.75 postage, with all the money, credit cards, driver's license, and other items intact. Nothing was missing. A note enclosed read: "Please do something kind for a stranger whenever you have the opportunity. My dad is a long-distance cyclist. He found someone's phone and wallet on the side of the road, and did the same. I was walking past a local bar, and found a phone case in the middle of the road around a corner and about a block away. The kind that carries credit cards, cash, the whole deal, and a new, for the time iPhone. I took it home hoping I could figure out whose it was from the info inside. Turns out it was unlocked. I found the most common contact, called that number. A dude answers and I say I just found this phone. Do you know the person that owns it? He says where are you? So I give him my cross streets. He says we'll be right there. 5 minutes later the phone rings, and the guy says he's outside. So I go outside. He has a woman with him. I hand him the phone, he hands it to her, she looks at the wallet section, and starts screaming, "You stole my money. Where's my money? Where are my credit cards?" She's clearly plastered. Dude points to the credit cards. "They're right there. And you spent all your money in the bar." He didn't take anything. And then they started arguing about how exactly she managed to drop her phone in the middle of the road around the corner from the bar after spending all her money. Talk about strangers you'll never forget. Took a train to NYC by myself for the first time. I was 18. Second time to NYC, first time ever on a train. I told the kiosk lady that I'd never been on a train before and asked if she might give me a quick rundown of what to do. Another train station employee was nearby and was so interested and amused that I was taking a train for the first time and was alone. He walked me through what to do, down to the smallest detail. No judgment, no meanness. He was just a guy with a silly disposition, delighting in a young person's safety, breaking up the doldrums of his week. I aspire to be that way when people ask me for help. Thanks, Frank P. You were a peach. We need more people like that. BRW, what is it like on a train? Goddamn, I'm 30 and never been on one either. The interior of most regional trains is similar to an airliner, but with more room and freedom to walk around. Bathrooms on most cars, probably a cafe car, a quiet car, like library quiet, a first-class car. They can be a little bumpy when walking, but not too bad. I have yet to try a sleeper or compartment train, but I'd like to. There are also historic trains, old cool trains, sightseeing trains, huge windows, and commuter trains, quite basic, closer to a bus. Find a train and take a ride. They're pretty cool. I was driving down south with my girlfriend. We have a blowout, so I put on the Doubt. The Doubt blows out while we're exiting the very next exit. So there we are, maybe 19 and at least 100 miles from anyone we know, at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I'm thinking on what to do next, and probably looked like there was something wrong, so this older man offered to help. He drives me 20 or so minutes to a junkyard to get a cheap tire. Then he puts the tires on the rim with no more than a pry bar and some soapy water. Had a compressor on his truck, so he aired it up and I put it on. And we went on our way. Oh, we need more people like that guy in the world. It starts with you. Play your part and I'll play mine. We can make this world bright enough to shine. I have a very similar story. I'm a minority born and raised in the South. My family was once taking a family vacation when I was around 12 years old. We had a blowout in Georgia on our way to Florida. We put a Doubt on and got to a gas station 15-ish miles from where we were, where the Doubt blew as soon as we were trying to leave and find a Walmart or somewhere to buy a tire. We waited a while, cars driving around us noone helping. Then all of a sudden, you hear loud-ass country music coming nearer and nearer. Then you see it. It was a lifted 1980s Dodge Ram, with 2 Confederate flags mounted in the back. Dude hops out of his truck, wearing his Confederate flag trucker hat, and flannel shirt with the arms cut off. He is what you imagine when you have to imagine the most redneck person ever. His belt buckle was fucking huge, he had cowboy boots on, etc. Anyway, dude comes over and we are expecting him to be racist stuff, but instead, he grabbed some chains and rigged the car to be towed behind his truck. He drove us to Walmart, and bought us a new tire, refusing to let us pay or give him any money for the help, and then we were on our way. I'll never forget him peeling off singing to some Tim McGraw. Edit guys, this is just a wholesome story. Don't buy me awards. Save your money and go over to our /random_acts_of_pizza and feed someone who is hungry instead. As a Redditor who once could not afford to feed myself more than 3-ish times a week last year, this subreddit literally saved my ass. Support them. Or somewhere like r/assistance. Link to list by r/assistance, that is, of other subreddits that can help you /allow you to help others. Man, with all the shit going on, needed to hear this story today. The foreign exchange student and his parents who walked past my park bench on campus and dropped his passport. I chased after them to return it, and his mom started screaming at me in broken English like, why you have his papers? Why you steal his papers? While the kid and his father looked like they were going to die from embarrassment. Foreign Karen lol. My son was a week old, and had to go to the doctor. I had severe early onset postpartum depression, and I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time since his birth. I locked my keys, phone, and son in the car. This incredibly wonderful older couple calmed me down, called CAA, parked beside my car and sat with me until the tow truck came and unlocked the car. The tow driver refused payment. I will never forget those 3 people. This filled my heart. How old is your son now? And how are you doing? He's 7, and doing great. I volunteer at a suicide hotline. Some guy, Bob, called in and we started talking about his home situation. Nothing absolutely horrendous. But he felt trapped, and stressed, and felt like he didn't have options. When people use language like that, our training says we should ask if they are thinking of suicide. Many volunteers have trouble with this. But if you mention suicide to someone who is not suicidal, it doesn't make them more suicidal, they just correct you and say no. I feel more like XYZ. So I asked Bob, you're using a lot of language that people use when they are thinking of suicide. Are you thinking of suicide? There was a pause. And then a huge wail. I could hear so much pain in his voice. I listened to him cry for at least 5 minutes. I've talked to people who had suicidal ideatio before, it would be better if I were dead kind of thinking, but with no plan. Bob said yes, he was considering suicide, and we talked it out a bit more. After the pause and wail, that was the most concerned I've ever been for a human being outside my family. This wasn't just talking, I felt like he had already made up his mind about it, which was so scary. I only know what he told me. I know he was in his car parked somewhere. I know we got a few short laughs out of each other and we made some plans for him. Plans are important because it gives you a sense that if he has something to do, to plan for, he can't commit suicide. Anyway, he truly is a stranger. I don't know his real name or what he looks like. I just know his story, and I know that he was in immense pain that day. He had a particular kind of accent, and, whenever I meet someone with that same accent, I think of him and hope he's okay. If you mention suicide to someone who is not suicidal, it doesn't make them more suicidal. This is an important topic to address, because so many people, including doctors, try to avoid the suicide topic because they are afraid they could trigger suicidal thoughts if they talk about it. But thankfully that's not how this works. Indeed, it is very important to ask directly if the person is considering suicide, even at the slightest hint. We made some plans for him. This is a really great tool to help suicidal strangers that you know nothing else about. What also works is signing a contract, can be done orally as well, that they promise to contact you immediately as soon as they get suicidal thoughts. This way they can always be sure that no matter how hopeless everything else is, there is someone out there who's ready to at least hear them out. Oh, you've reminded me of someone. I worked on a similar hotline. I had a call from a young woman who was outside her ex's place. We talked about how it wasn't going to happen and eventually she decided to walk home. I stayed on with her for the walk. She was so lovely and so sad. I desperately wished I could go meet her and take down the pub and be her friend. We laughed a bit and she cried a bit, and I hope, I got her thinking about some things because she paused a few times and said I asked very good questions. I asked the suicide question because of a few things she was skirting round, and she told me she had the pills. Not a plan, but just the pills there, enough if she needed. She got home and warned me she'd have to go quiet while she got to her room. It somehow sort of broke our flow and we went back to non-suicide things. We finished the call eventually, but that's the one that stayed with me years later. I can still picture her walk home, her sneaking in the house, the daily life she described. I wonder if the pills are still in her cupboard. I can't think of that call without wishing I'd done better by her. It sounds to me like you did very well by her. Thank you. I think a misconception about suicide is that people who do it, attempt it, or consider it, are always depressed. There are many complex reasons people kill themselves, and depression is only one. Sometimes outsiders will never really know, and sometimes the suicidal person doesn't know either or can't articulate it. I personally feel like it's one of the reasons it is so hard to intervene unless the situation is obvious and logical and based on depression. Like, nobody expects Jim will kill himself over gambling debts, or Jacinta will overdose because she's pissed off at her parents for grounding her, or Imran will consider it because his career is going nowhere, or Jin will plan their death because their arthritis pain is unbearable. So like the person you met, it's often not obvious. If not for you, maybe nobody would have thought it was a bad situation for him and couldn't have helped. I think a misconception about suicide is that people who do it, attempt it, or consider it, are always depressed. Preach. When any famous person dies, it's also depression this or that. I have been diagnosed with depression, and I couldn't be asked to kill myself. I'm also scared AF to do it. Not everyone who kills themselves is even mentally ill. When suicide becomes a symptom of diagnosing mental illness post-mortem, then everyone gets to feel safe and sane and far away from death.